That's fine. I just, I've asked her to be secretary, so,
Okay.
but it doesn't matter. If you don't,
It was Ray Rogers.
That's right.
okay.
Or it is Ray Rogers.
He lost, did he lose the book? Well, he's not, but he's not going to be secretary much
You
longer.
said I have a book?
No, you're our secretary.
Well, he was. He's about to be,
Right,
he's
secretary.
about to be something else.
I don't remember who was.
Anyway.
What?
That's you.
Yeah, well, yeah,
That's
sure.
right here.
If you were the secretary, I just signed it.
Well, anyway.
Everybody didn't have a book.
All right, we got everybody here. I haven't counted, but let's call the meeting to order. I want to thank you for your service on the management committee. Thank you. I've never served on management before. I have served on rules, and I always thought one of the highest honors that I've had in the House is to be elected somebody's colleague, so you can be proud of that. It's a special thing, I think. I'm looking forward to serving with you. Before we get started, I'll just make a few preliminary comments. I'm very much committed, and I've told several of you this, and I want to make it clear to everybody, I'm very much committed for this committee to be what it's supposed to be, which is the management arm of the House. I want us to act as a committee. I want us to make decisions as a committee. Now, you know there are certain things under the rules that the pro tems can do and should do, but basically policy decisions, decisions that are out of the ordinary, certainly that are not in accordance with the normal policy. We actually, we'll actually have, obviously from time to time, special circumstances or whatever. Those are for the committee to make. I intend for us to meet regularly. I would like to see this committee meet weekly while we're in session. If we find we're meeting for no purpose, we can stop. But I really think it's, at least as we get started, it's very important for you members of the management, because that's why you were elected here, to be able to understand what this house, how this house is operating, what our situation is financially, personnel-wise, space-wise, any number of things. That's what your job is. And so the only way I know to do that is to meet and inform ourselves about that process. So I want us to meet regularly. We're not going to decide yet I would like to have a standing meeting time. I'm kind of kicking around, and I want to just throw this out there. We won't try to do this today because we can't meet Monday anyway. But I'm thinking perhaps Mondays at 3:30 while we're in session. I'm thinking meeting 30 minutes before we convene. Might be convenient for everybody. I talked to Andrew. I didn't want to put too much on him as clerk because I always prepare him to go forward. He didn't think that would be an issue with him. I hope it's not an issue with legal staff. So we're not going to finally decide that. Some of you may have a problem with that. You want to share with me. And we'll talk about that. But I anticipate us probably having a standing meeting, on Mondays at 3:30. I also want this down the road. I think it would behoove us as a management committee looking ahead for us to meet monthly when we're not in session. I think we need to take a look at how the House finances are running, travel running, all those different things. The clerk's going to have a lot of responsibility, particularly when we're not in session, and Pro Tem does too for that matter. But the committee needs to be a committee of oversight, needs to be informed, needs to be plugged in. This has got to be a real committee. Frankly, I don't want to have to make decisions. The speaker should not have to make decisions. The clerk should not be put in a position of making decisions that properly are committee decisions. Now, there are things we'll have to decide and maybe get ratification later. I understand that. But that's the committee's responsibility. This is a real committee. I want everybody, if anybody has a different mindset from experience or expectation, let's disabuse ourselves of that. We're going to have a real working committee here, and we're going to be plugged in, and you're going to be informed and active as to what's going in. I see Representative Young here. I told him he's welcome to come here, and that goes for any House member. Anyone's welcome to attend our meetings. We're going to have transparency. We're going to have openness. That's what this committee needs to do. Now, on occasion, we have, as you know, we have to deal with difficult issues, personnel issues, perhaps from time to time. Those sorts of things may not be quite so open. There's a executive session procedure, and you understand that. When that's necessary, we'll do that. We're not going to do that as a matter of course. The norm is that we're going to be open and transparent. The members have every entitlement to know that. Now, having said that, we don't have an agenda in front of us. I understand the first thing we should do is approve our minutes of the last meeting of the Management Committee, which I understand were minutes for a meeting on November the 16th, 2011, here at the Capitol. Do people have copies of minutes? Do you see this? All right, I was not here, obviously. I don't know who was here. Look at these minutes. Tell us if these are accurate. We're not going to revisit decisions that were made or not made. That's not our purpose today. Our purpose is to approve these minutes if they accurately reflect what transpired at that meeting. Are these accurate? Yes. I recognize the lady.
Mr. Speaker, I have a
Yeah,
question
question.
about the
Yeah,
minutes. I
yeah.
have a question about a trip that may have been taken after the, it's not listed here, it's travel requests by the clerk and by several staff members possibly.
You're referring to item 3 where it was
No,
requested, or what are you
No,
talking
it
about?
was not requested.
Okay.
We never addressed it.
Okay. Well, it was on the travel request, is what I'm saying, but it was
No.
withdrawn.
I knew.
Another.
I knew.
This was to Tampa. This was a trip taken by the clerk after the fact,
Okay.
after we met.
Well,
And
lady, let me say this.
I'd just like to know how much was spent.
I think that's let me say this. What I think we need to do, if that was not a matter that was discussed at this meeting, we need to see if these minutes accurately reflect what transpired at that meeting. We're going to have, as we go forward here, I'm going to ask several of these members, of each of you, to take certain areas of responsibility, to look into different areas, and that's probably the appropriate way to do that. Gentlemen, from Hines, you're welcome. I wasn't trying to not
No,
recognize you.
I understand. But as far as my reading is, this is what we did.
This is accurate. You're right.
Well, right
At that
now,
meeting.
right
And
now,
I'll make them, if I'm recognized.
You recognize
I'll make
it.
a motion that we accept these minutes as what we did at that
do
meeting.
we have a second?
And I second it.
All right. Any discussion? Again, this is represented to me since I was not here, that these minutes accurately reflect what transpired. Next month, or next week, or whenever we approve the minutes of this meeting, obviously we'll be in a position to make a better judgment.
I don't think Amira ever requested, she withdrew it. I don't think that ever happened. She never requested to go so far, didn't she withdraw it?
Well, I think the minutes reflect that they were withdrawn, do they not?
Oh, okay. I don't have the same thing you got. Okay. I'm looking at the wrong.
I think what I read earlier, it reflected that. Now, let me see, am I correct about that?
You're right, I was looking at the second page. I
Yeah, the
apologize.
second, that's correct. I think that was withdrawn. Yeah, that's third paragraph. So with that said, these minutes appear to be accurate recitation of that. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the November 16th meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now, having done that, and this committee is somewhat different than most committees. Normally, I'm used to, and you are too, when a committee organizes, one of the things you do and should do is elect a vice chairman and a secretary. I want to do that because I think it's important for us to do that. I don't know how formal that is in the sense of, certainly I was joking with the gentleman I asked to serve as vice chairman. He agreed, and I said, of course you realize you won't be able to be chairman for anything else. He quickly said, well, I resign. So obviously that's not the case, but I do think for structural purposes we should have that. And as far as I know, and I may be wrong if I'm mistaken, but I think Ray, Mr. Rogers, Representative Rogers, gentleman from Rankin, I think he's senior on this committee in service, and I would ask him respectfully if he would agree to serve as vice chairman with the committee's approval. And I'd also suggest that Representative Cockerham, Amit, the lady from Amit, would serve as secretary of this committee. If they would both be willing, if you're not willing, please say so.
I would be honored.
All right, if that's okay. Now, are there any other, I don't want to make the appointments necessarily, I guess I can, but I want the committee to approve that. Anyone else feel strongly about any one of these?
I second it.
All right, we have my recommendation in a second that Mr. Rogers be committee vice chairman, and Ms. Cockerham will be committee secretary. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you. I appreciate you being willing to serve. I don't think it's going to be intensive. I mean, your committee service will be probably, but not in those offices necessarily, but who knows? I want us to have, I had originally intended this meeting just to have a discussion about the areas we need to look at, because we do need to get our hands around the process. And my original thought was to think about some areas and then come back next week and maybe assign some people to look in some areas. And I got to thinking about it. You know, I don't know when the speaker is going to name his chairman and his committees. I could conceivably see that as happening sometime next week, maybe late next week. I don't know that's true. I'm not representing that's true. Don't misunderstand me. But I could see that happening. When that happens, I mean, people are going to be wanting to know about space and office and that sort of thing, naturally. So we probably need to move a little quicker than I originally had anticipated. So what I would like to do, I've come across, and we had a discussion the other day, and I lost my notes from that. I had staff and Andrew also So if I leave off an area, please let me know. But we talked about a need for the committee to get its arms around space. This committee is responsible for the assignment of space that the House of Representatives occupies and is in charge of. That's not everything in the Capitol, obviously not the grounds, but there is space within the Capitol that we're responsible for. We need to understand as a committee, a lot of new people on this committee, me first and foremost, I guess, we need to have an understanding of what our space is, how it's being utilized, and whether it's being utilized correctly. I suspect, I don't know this to be true, I suspect through the years that maybe we've gotten some things a little out of whack. I could see a situation where maybe a particular chairman wanted a different space or something, that being accommodated. That may not be true. I don't know. I want us to look and see, because I don't want personalities to get involved in this. We don't know who the chairman is going to be. I want us to see kind of where the pods of activity are, where it makes sense for staffing so that we're getting the right efficiencies. And now's the time to do that. And quite frankly, I think we all anticipate having a lot of chairmen that probably have not been chairman before, have been chairman a while. Now's the time to make those sorts of decisions. People aren't personally invested in space now anyway. So this committee has an opportunity to take control of that situation and make sure it's working like it ought to. Now, I have asked, I do want to kind of make these appointments. I want to have 3 of the members of this committee look into the space situation. Now, not necessarily to make decisions per se for the committee, but to get a good handle on it, get the facts, and kind of report back to this committee so that we can make a judgment. One, whether we need to make any changes. I mean, conceivably we could change, move this committee to another room or something like that. I don't think anything like that drastic is probably called for. I'm not aware of any situations that would mandate that. But it could be just ignorant. There might be something that makes sense to do. And that's why we want to have these folks look. I want to ask Representative Zuber, and you can call this a subcommittee. I guess it should be a subcommittee, a space subcommittee or whatever. I'd like to ask Representative Zuber to head that up. Representative Turner, if you could assist him with that. And Representative Perkins is not here. I want Representative Perkins, I've not had a chance to mention that to him, but I anticipate Willie will be willing to do that. I hope so. For the 3 of you, I would like to appoint you 3 to look into the space requirements of this of the House with an idea of giving some sort. Doesn't necessarily have to be a final report, but I'm anticipating we'll meet next Wednesday at some point. And at that time, we're getting pretty close to the time we'll be looking at space assignments. And so that being the case, maybe have some sort of preliminary sketch, at least some information we should know by then if we've got any major issues we need to address. And so I would like to ask you to do that. If you do that, that would be Zuber, Turner, and Perkins.
And I know they're going to report back next week or after they meet. But we, as a committee, we've been talking about trying to get some additional space for
that is one thing.
For members.
That's one thing that they've also going to be charged with, and we've had some ideas about that. I think it's very important. Look, we've got, I think, 35 freshmen. I believe that's right, 35 freshmen. Well, one very practical problem is, well, first of all, we don't have room for right now for everybody. That's the big problem. But the second thing is, we got room for some freshmen, but not all. And how do you want to do that? I just, you can draw for parking spaces. You can draw for seats on the floor. I hate to put people in this situation. Some people have space and some don't. That's just not equitable, it seems to me, if there's a way to deal with it. I don't know if we can, but I think we need to give that a high priority.
We need to look at it.
Absolutely, and Representative Zuber is aware of that, and you and Representative Turner and Representative Perkins, if you will keep that in mind and take a hard look at what spaces may be available. It's possible there's some joint space that's not totally under our control that we may have to consult with DFA, or we may have to certainly consult with the Senate about. We'll have to look at that. But that's something your subcommittee can look at and see what's feasible and what can be discussed about. Did you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You recognize me.
Just for a tidbit of knowledge, there was some conversation about redoing the lounge downstairs. I can't think of the room number, but
right.
Where our mailboxes are.
Right.
There was some conversation about that in terms of office space, and that I'm aware of. And there had been some conversation about where Claire Ledger.
Right.
There's supposed to be a lot of space. Those are the 2 areas that
there's some area in the back there, I understand, that's space, but if we can find a way to get to it without compromising their journalistic secrecy and all that.
Yeah, we've already looked at some of it.
Well, Representative Zuber is aware of that, and those things will be looked at, I'm sure. Representative Turner.
Would that be something that would be mutual between us and the Senate?
if we got to that point, yes, but I think at this point, we want to assess it for our needs and see what's available, and then if we think there's something we need to discuss with DFA or the Senate, I think that's a committee decision. I'd respectfully ask y'all to come back to the committee and say, look, we think, space down here might be something we can talk about, but we need to discuss this or float this idea with somebody or whatever, and let's do that as a committee. But certainly, I think your portfolio would include the imagination to try to see if we can find that sort of space. Because I really think every member ought to have somewhere to hang out. Let me say this to John about Reverend Hines. I remember when that discussion was made about the lounge, I didn't like it. In fact, I remember writing a speaker a letter, not that my letter influenced mine. But I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it that way. I'm sure. What I'm
probably turned it.
Probably did. Could have been. But my point was, because I was one of those really without in space. And to be honest with you, the house lounge is off limits to anybody but members. It's one of the few places a guy without an office or any place can get away from a lobbyist or get away from anybody. And Chuck, you'll find that out. Some of these people will stalk you up here. And if you don't have an office, someone will go hide away. You go to the house lounge. I'm just telling you the truth. Y'all know it. And our freshman members have to have a place they can duck out of sight. And that's just good for everybody. So.
Mr. Chair, my statement was only to make people aware.
I understand. And now that
I like to have an to the bathroom myself.
And look, now that I got an office, we'll probably look into that again. Let me say this, lady. The gentleman from Lauderdale has asked us, and the gentleman from Lauderdale, I just want to remind you, you'll find this true with every House committee. Members are welcome to sit. They're not welcome to speak except with unanimous consent of the committee. And you did have your hand. I think the committee would extend you that courtesy, but I want to make that clear. Yes, a non-member cannot speak without unanimous. Do we have an objection? Representative Young asked a question or have a comment? All right, you recognize.
No, just remark with regards to your comment.
Mm-hmm.
As a freshman, I wasn't soliciting office space. That way I didn't have to hide.
Well, that's a good point. Lady?
Mr. Speaker, I was wondering if you would be sure, if we would make sure that the subcommittee confer not only with DFA but with the architectural historian, because there are some things that, in fact, almost everything has to be run through them as well as DFA.
Yeah, it'd be embarrassing if we decided to do something and we found out we were illegal and have to back up. I mean, that's one thing to say, well, we got the power and we find out we don't. That'd be embarrassing. So that's a very good point. All right, well, that's then I'd like to make those appointments, Zuber, Turner, and Perkins. Now, another issue that is one that is of very much importance is our personnel situation. Frankly, I don't know who all works here or what they do or how much they're paid. And that's kind of, it's kind of cumbersome to say that, but that's our job to know. And it's this committee's job to know who's working, what they're doing, who they're assigned to, how much they make. At some point, and probably not immediately, but at some point, we probably need to have a salary survey of some sort to see what the Senate's doing, see what other workers in state governments do. And I don't want us to be out of line greatly one way or the other. I mean, I just don't think that's appropriate. We want to be in line, and we may be. I have no idea. I don't know what our staffing needs are. I don't know if we're overstaffed, understaffed, if we need to move staff around. I don't know, and I dare say you probably don't either. But I will say this, it's our job to know. Okay, that's what the management committee is supposed to do. So, this is a big job, a big task, and I've asked Representative Bennett if he would. I've written down Representative Martin, but that's got to be Martinson. So I've asked Representative Bennett, Representative Martinson, and Representative Calhoun, if you will, the three of you, if you would kind of take that bit into your teeth. Again, not to make these kind of decisions necessarily, but to get some information and bring it back to the committee. Question? Yes,
who's chair?
I would like to see Representative Bennett chair that, if you would. If you would kind of head that subcommittee up. He looks mean, and that's he's got that look about him now. So anyway, that would be Bennett, Martinson, and Calhoun. Now, travel is one. folks, just being honest with y'all know we've had issues with travel. I'm not saying right, wrong, ugly, well, we've had discussions and controversy about travel. Our interest, it seems to me, as a committee, is to have a consistent policy, whatever policy that is, establish a policy that the House is comfortable with, and then let's follow the policy. That's all my concern is right now. We're always going to have situations where, as a committee, we may be asked to look at special circumstances or whatever. I have a copy of I have not read it yet, but Teresa has given me a copy of the travel policy. I'm given to understand the policy is probably okay, but I don't want to make that judgment, but the policy is probably pretty sound. It's probably just more incumbent upon us to make sure we follow the policy, because that has not always been done, to my understanding. But I've asked, I'd like kind of a committee of one to do this, because I don't know, it's not that it's not, it's just that I think one person could adequately do it. And Ray, I was going to ask you if you wouldn't mind doing that. We'll make you a copy of the travel policy. Look at it. If you need to confer with the legal staff or somebody what this means or how has this been. The truth is we need to make sure the policy is something we're comfortable with. And if it needs tweaking, we can tweak it. If we need to spell things out, they're not spelled out, we need to do that. What I would like us to see us do, not only with the travel policy, but frankly with all the policies. I personally am not satisfied just to let things rock alone and something happens and say, well, that's the way they've always done it. I think that's a cop-out. I think this committee needs to examine the policies, and if the policies are something we're comfortable with, we need to re-adopt them and embrace them and say, okay, this is the way it's going to be. We don't need to pass that buck. If it's a policy of the House, it's because we've adopted it as a policy of the House. So it's incumbent before we can do that, we've got to familiarize ourselves with it, and we've got to say, okay, this is what we want because this is what we're going to live by. It would be easy for us just to let it slide and then try to put off on somebody else. That's not right. We may have issues with what's gone on before. I don't know. But that's before, and this is now. It's us now. We need to make a decision if we're going to follow this policy or not. Not, let's change it. But whatever we have, we need to embrace it and adopt it, and we need to follow it. And so travel is just one of those areas, but that's one. And Representative Rogers, if you could do that, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
For want of a better term, I don't know this is a better term, but because we keep around there, I call this subcommittee workplace environment. Workplace environment. This would encompass such things as sexual harassment, any sort of discrimination, any sort of just not job performance. That would be more of a personnel issue that Bennett's do, but not so much that, but just just workplace environment for want of a better. I know I've been told that we need to have an updated sexual harassment training. That's something we've got to do. It's incumbent upon us to do that. We need to do that. So we need to decide how to go about doing that. There may be issues in place, as far as, for want of a better way of saying, racial sensitivity or whatever. I don't think so, but maybe so. I don't know. I don't want to be blind to that stuff. So if there are things we need from a policy standpoint, this is the committee to do that. So let's look at that and see. Now, I have written down, I was going to ask Representative Cockerham and Representative Rogers to do that. And I'd like to also, I didn't ask you, John, I should have, but I'd like to ask Representative Hines if you don't mind working with these two ladies, do you, on something like that? If you wouldn't mind doing that?
No, I don't have a problem.
That'd be great.
I'm very familiar. I teach sexual harassment.
Well, I thought you had something in there. So if you would, let Representative Cockerham, Rogers, and Hines take that. And I was going to ask Representative Cockerham if you wouldn't mind chairing that subcommittee if you do that. And so that would be those three people if you do that. Now, obviously the budget, by that I don't mean the state budget, I mean the House budget, our internal budget. I have no idea what our circumstances are, other than I'm told that the former clerk says we're in good shape. That's good news. I hope we are. I believe we are. If he says so. I don't doubt that. But again, it's incumbent upon us to know. It would be kind of to short hop the staff and all of that now. I would like, we'll get with Andrew, I'd like us to, maybe we need Lavinia in here or something next Wednesday or something. We need some sort of presentation on the status of our current budget. We're halfway through the fiscal year. What do we have, what have we spent? What do we have left? Are we okay with discretionary days, travel? Where are we? We all know we're in a tough time fiscally with the state, and I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure, certainly, that we at least live within the budget we said we're going to live in for ourselves. I'd hate to get in here and find out different. So we need to take a hard look at that, and frankly, we just don't have numbers. I guess Andrew would be the one to address that too, to ask him to see if, is he here? Oh, he's behind me. I was wondering, I felt that presence. Is that okay with you? Can we think we'll meet next Wednesday at some point if we could get, I'm saying Lavinia, I guess that would be the person to make a presentation for us on that. At some point, as we move through this, and particularly when we're not in session, I think we need to have kind of a monthly report of where we are. We don't necessarily, as a committee, need to see who's gone where, that sort of thing, but we need to know how much money we spent, say that month, on travel or requests. But we need to keep our fingers on it. And that's what this committee's supposed to do, and we're going to do that. Okay? We're going to be involved. That's what we're supposed to do. Those are the areas that I had in mind. Did I leave one out? Something nagging that was something we had talked about. And we're going to throw this open just a second. There's another area we need to talk about. But did you write those down? I wrote them down, and then I left some awesome lists, so I tried to reconstruct it from memory. There's something nagging that tells me we have one more area we want to look at. Can you think of anything, Andrew? Or is that it? Hopefully that's it. But we may have suggestions for other areas to look at, and I think the lady from Madison. Yes, ma'am.
I agree with think that there's a very important issue that we hadn't considered, and that's our security.
Security. Well, let me address that, because you're correct. And some of that has been done already. And then just as a matter of course, let me say this, just as a matter of course, I'm a lawyer, some of you are, I represent employers, just as a matter of precaution, when you have a staff change, there's just things you do. Now, you just do that. One of the things we're going to do, and have already got the wheels in motion, we're going to be changing some locks up here, okay? Particularly on the third floor, this, and also downstairs in the legislative services. That's just something we need to do. We need to know who's got our keys to our facilities. There are certain cards, access cards, that we need to cut off. Again, not picking on anybody, but people that were employed here that no longer are employed, that just we don't need to have access to, and that just should be SOP for our business. You people have been in business, Chuck, you're in business, you know what I'm talking about. So that's in place already. Okay. Also, there's some issues.
Does that include the second floor?
As far as the lock change, it's going to include, I think, all of our space eventually. But now our priorities. And by that I mean I don't know if they can do all that in a weekend is what I'm saying. But immediately, like the next day or two, they're going to be looking at Speaker's office, Pro Tem office, certainly downstairs Legislative Service and Clerk's office. Those because those are areas that are sensitive areas that there may be sensitive stuff in our another here I can tell you. But the other three for sure, there might be something sensitive in there. Most of the other offices probably not, because people, I think, are in a state of flux. If somebody's in an office, that's another thing we need to talk about. We don't need anybody in office right now. We need to be preparing. But be that as it may, it's probably not a security issue, is what I'm saying. Yes, sir.
I'm assuming computer access.
That's the second. That's the second point. Again, until this committee can make a decision about who needs to have access to, like the travel records, financial, that sort of thing, of the particular members, we have restricted that access until we can do this survey issue. Come in if you'd like. Until we can look at that issue, and that has been. Come on in if you like. That has been addressed and is in process. The particulars of it escape me, but I know we got it under control. Randy, you want to address to that? As far as
I've cut off access to email accounts and everything. I mean, cut cards off and things like that for people.
Financial records.
And also,
Lavinia's records.
Yes, I cut off, I guess, 3 different people that had access to payroll and financial records that really had no reason to.
Well, again, the point is this committee needs to decide who needs to have access to that. And we're going to do that in short order. That's part of the purpose of gathering this information, so we can make intelligent decisions about who needs to be doing what. We may reassign people. We may have certain people doing things that weren't doing it before, and certain people not doing things that were. I don't know. That's why we're gathering this information, and that's why we're in the process of getting it quickly, so we can make intelligent decisions. But again, you have a change in business or whatever, that's what you do. You make sure you got control of the situation, then you assess it, and you make a decision on what you want to do. And that's all this is about. But that's in progress.
So appropriations and ways and means, I don't know if there's anything sensitive there or not, but I just,
Well, again, Andrew, we discussed, we're going to have the locksmith people look at our entire situation, right? It's just that, again, that may be the immediate priority of the 4 areas I mentioned.
Right. Probably looking at about